I'm Madeline, 34, and until last year, I thought I knew everything about my family. As a successful real estate agent, I understood the value of the $430,000 home my parents left me. When my brother Robert fell on hard times, letting his family move in seemed natural. I never imagined I'd overhear him say those crushing words. "She's not real family, anyway, since she was adopted." That night changed everything. I walked in with the deed, dropped it on the table, and told them they had 30 days to leave. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family betrayal. Growing up in our Portland neighborhood, I never questioned my place in the family. Our home was modest but comfortable, a 2-story craftsman with a wraparound porch where Mom would serve lemonade during summer afternoons. Dad, with his passion for home improvement, constantly pointed out details about property value and maintenance. "Madeline," he'd say, examining the crown molding or hardwood floors, "understand what makes a house valuable, and you'll never make a poor investment." Those lessons stuck with me, eventually guiding me toward my career in real estate. Robert was 5 years older than me, and our relationship was complicated from the beginning. While I saved my allowance and worked summer jobs, Robert spent money as quickly as it came in. His first business venture, a car detailing service, collapsed within 6 months because he kept dipping into the company account for personal expenses. By 23, he had maxed out 3 credit cards and was asking our parents for loans he never repaid. Despite our different approaches to money, we maintained a cordial relationship through our 20s. I focused on building my career, working 60-hour weeks to establish myself in Portland's competitive real estate market. My dedication paid off when I was offered a senior position at a prestigious agency in Seattle. The decision to move wasn't easy, but at 28, I knew this opportunity might not come again. "I'm so proud of you," Mom said when I told her about the job offer. "Your father and I always knew you were destined for success." Dad nodded in agreement, though I noticed a flash of sadness in his eyes at the thought of me moving 200 miles away. After relocating to Seattle, I made it a priority to drive back to Portland at least twice a month. During these visits, I noticed subtle changes in my parents that worried me. Dad, once robust and energetic, moved more slowly, taking breaks when working in the garden he loved. Mom, always the social butterfly of the neighborhood, seemed increasingly focused on Dad's needs, declining invitations from friends to stay home with him. During one visit, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen while Dad napped in his recliner. "Your father won't admit it, but his heart isn't what it used to be," she confided, her voice barely above a whisper. "The doctor wants him to take it easy, but you know how stubborn he is." Robert lived just 15 minutes away from our parents with his wife Tina and their 2 children, Ashley and Jackson. Despite this proximity, his visits were infrequent and typically coincided with needing financial assistance. "Robert was just here," Mom would tell me during our phone calls, a note of forced brightness in her voice. "He's having a tough time with the mortgage this month, but things will turn around soon." When Dad's health took a serious downturn, I didn't hesitate to take a leave of absence from work. My boss, Jessica, was understanding. "Family comes first, Madeline. Take all the time you need." I rented a furnished apartment near my parents' home and spent my days helping Mom with Dad's care, driving him to medical appointments, and managing his medications. During those 3 months, Robert visited exactly 4 times. Each visit lasted less than an hour, and he always left with money, claiming unexpected expenses for the kids or house repairs. "Your brother has his own family to worry about," Dad said after one such visit, but I heard the disappointment in his voice. Dad passed away peacefully on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. I was holding his hand while Mom stroked his hair, telling him it was okay to let go. Robert arrived at the hospital 30 minutes after I called to tell him Dad was gone. He cried genuinely, and for a moment, I saw the brother I remembered from childhood, vulnerable and human beneath his careless exterior. The weeks following Dad's funeral were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and supporting Mom through waves of grief. I extended my leave of absence, unable to imagine returning to Seattle while Mom was so fragile. She would sit for hours in Dad's chair, holding his cardigan against her face to breathe in his fading scent. "You should go back to your life," she insisted after I'd been there for a month. "I'll be fine on my own." But the vacant look in her eyes told a different story. Robert's visits increased briefly after Dad died, but quickly returned to their previous pattern. He brought the kids occasionally, which brightened Mom's day, but these visits inevitably ended with hushed conversations in the kitchen about his latest financial crisis. Once, I overheard Mom saying, "That's the last of this month's pension, Robert. I need the rest for bills." The defeated slump of her shoulders as he left made my heart ache. I tried talking to Robert about his constant requests for money. "Mom can't keep supporting you," I said during one phone call. "She's on a fixed income now." "You don't understand what it's like having kids and a mortgage," he snapped. "Not all of us can have fancy careers in Seattle. Some of us have real responsibilities." The call ended with his promise to do better, a promise I'd heard many times before. As winter settled over Portland, Mom's health began to decline. She lost weight, forgot appointments, and sometimes seemed confused about simple tasks. The doctor mentioned depression and the physical toll of grief, prescribing medication and suggesting counseling. I attended the first few sessions with her, watching her struggle to articulate the emptiness she felt without Dad. My twice-monthly visits became weekly, then permanent as I requested to work remotely indefinitely. Jessica was less accommodating this time. "Madeline, I sympathize with your situation, but we need you here for client meetings." We compromised on a 3-day remote, 2-day in-office arrangement that meant exhausting commutes, that allowed me to keep my position while supporting Mom. Throughout this time, my resentment toward Robert grew. He knew Mom was struggling but continued to burden her with his problems rather than offering support. During one particularly difficult week when Mom had bronchitis, I called Robert to ask him to pick up her prescription. "I can't today," he said, the sound of a sports broadcast clear in the background. "I promised the kids I'd watch their soccer practice." "Mom needs her medicine, Robert. She can hardly breathe." "Can't one of the neighbors help? Mrs. Wilson is always offering." I ended up driving through rush hour traffic from Seattle to deliver the prescription myself, arriving to find Mom feverish and alone. That night, after getting her settled, I cried from exhaustion and frustration, wondering how Robert could be so detached from the woman who had always supported him. 6 months after Dad's passing, Mom's health deteriorated rapidly. What began as occasional forgetfulness progressed to concerning memory lapses and physical weakness. A series of tests revealed the devastating diagnosis: advanced pancreatic cancer that had already spread to her liver. The oncologist spoke gently about comfort care and making the most of the time she had left. I immediately took an extended leave from work, this time with no return date specified. Jessica was sympathetic but businesslike. "I'll have to fill your position temporarily, Madeline. We'll discuss your future with the company when you're ready to return." The implied message was clear. My job might not be waiting for me, but at that moment, it was the least of my concerns. Mom declined rapidly over the next few weeks. I transformed the dining room into a bedroom so she wouldn't have to navigate the stairs, and hospice nurses visited daily to manage her pain. Robert's visits increased slightly during this time, but they remained brief and often ended with him asking for money in hushed tones near the front door. "College application fees for Ashley," he explained one afternoon. "And Jackson needs braces. Insurance only covers part of it." I wrote him a check without argument, unwilling to create tension that Mom might sense. She always seemed more alert when Robert was around, smiling at the mention of her grandchildren and asking questions about their activities that she sometimes repeated minutes later. During her final week, Mom had a surprisingly lucid day. She asked to sit on the porch, bundled in blankets, despite the spring warmth. I need to talk to you about the will, she said as we watched birds at the feeder Dad had built years ago. Mom, we don't need to discuss that now, I said, reaching for her thin hand. Yes, we do. Her voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Your father and I made our decisions carefully. The house and most of our savings will go to you. I started to protest, but she continued. Robert will receive $20,000. We know it doesn't seem equal, but you've proven yourself responsible. Robert. She paused, searching for the right words. Robert needs to learn some difficult lessons we won't be here to teach. I understand, I said, though I was already anticipating Robert's reaction. Mom squeezed my hand. We trust you to do what's right, Madeline. You always have. She passed away peacefully 3 days later, with me by her side and Robert stuck in traffic, arriving 15 minutes too late to say goodbye. His genuine grief at the funeral temporarily bridged the gap between us, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were truly brother and sister, united in our loss if nothing else. The reading of the will took place in the office of my parents' longtime attorney, Mr. Phillips. As Mom had indicated, the house and bulk of their assets came to me, while Robert received $20,000. Mr. Phillips explained that my parents had updated their will 2 years earlier, after Robert had borrowed $30,000 from them to start another business that quickly failed. Robert's face remained impassive during the reading, but I noticed his knuckles widening as he gripped the armrests of his chair. When Mr. Phillips finished, Robert stood abruptly. I need to process this, he said, and left without looking at me. Later that evening he called. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the tension underneath. Tina and I are having trouble making rent, he said without preamble. The landlord raised it again, and with the kids' expenses. I took a deep breath. Robert, what are you asking? The house is just sitting empty now. It makes sense for us to move in, at least temporarily. It would give us time to save for a down payment on our own place. The request wasn't entirely unexpected. I had been considering selling the house but hadn't been emotionally ready to start the process. How temporary is temporary? I asked. 6 months, maybe a year at most. Just until we get back on our feet. After considering for a few days, I agreed to a 6-month arrangement. Robert and his family would move into the house, contribute to utilities and maintenance, and use this time to stabilize their finances and find permanent housing. I would return to Seattle and my job, visiting periodically to check on the property. You're a lifesaver, Maddie, Robert said when I handed in the keys, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. The kids are so excited to have actual bedrooms instead of sharing a room in our apartment. Tina hugged me awkwardly. We can't thank you enough. This means everything to us. I hugged the move in the following weekend, watching as Ashley and Jackson explored the house with excitement. Both children resembled Robert, with his hazel eyes and quick smile. Ashley, at 14, was already showing the stubborn determination that ran in our family. 12-year-old Jackson was quieter, with a thoughtful nature that reminded me of Dad. We'll take good care of the place, Tina promised as we carried boxes from their rental truck. It's such a beautiful home. Just remember this is temporary. I reminded them gently. I'll probably sell the house next year. Of course, Robert agreed readily. By then we'll have saved enough for our own place. The $20,000 from the will plus what we save on rent should give us a decent down payment. I returned to Seattle the next day, feeling both relieved and apprehensive. Part of me was glad the house wouldn't be sitting empty, vulnerable to break-ins or deterioration from neglect. Another part worried about entrusting it to Robert, whose track record with responsibility was spotty at best. My return to work was smoother than expected. Jessica had shifted some of my clients to other agents, but kept the most valuable ones in my portfolio. We're glad to have you back full-time, she said during our first meeting. Take a few weeks to get up to speed, and then we'll talk about expanding your client base again. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction from grief and the complicated emotions surrounding the arrangement with Robert. We spoke weekly by phone, brief conversations where he assured me everything was fine with the house. I drove down once a month to check on things, finding the place reasonably well kept during these initial visits. "See? We're taking good care of your investment," Robert said during my second visit, gesturing around the living room. There were toys scattered about and new furniture I didn't recognize, but nothing concerning. "Our investment," I corrected him. "This house means as much to you as it does to me." He nodded, but something in his expression made me uneasy. "Right. Family home and all that." Tina was always gracious during these visits, offering coffee and updating me on the children's activities. "Ashley made the honor roll," she announced proudly during one visit. "And Jackson joined the science club. They're really thriving here." I was genuinely happy for them. Despite my complicated relationship with Robert, I wanted the best for his children. "That's wonderful," I said. "Mom and Dad would be so proud." As I prepared to leave that day, Robert mentioned casually, "By the way, we're a little short on the utility contribution this month. Jackson needed a new laptop for school. I'll make it up next month." I nodded, unsurprised but disappointed. "Just keep track of what you owe, okay?" "Absolutely," he promised, walking me to my car. "We're so grateful for this opportunity, Maddie. It's really helping us turn things around." I drove back to Seattle wanting to believe him, hoping that this arrangement might not only provide his family with stability, but perhaps repair a fractured relationship as well. 3 months into our arrangement, the first real signs of trouble began to emerge. My monthly visits revealed subtle but concerning changes to the property. The once immaculate lawn that Dad had maintained with such pride was now patchy and overgrown in spots. Inside, I noticed stains on the carpet that hadn't been there before, scuff marks on the walls, and a general sense of disorder that went beyond normal family living. "Sorry about the mess," Tina said during one visit, hastily gathering toys from the living room floor. "The kids have been extra active with summer break." I nodded, trying to be understanding. "That's okay. How are the repairs coming along on the leaky bathroom faucet I mentioned last time?" Robert looked up from his phone. "Oh, I haven't had a chance to get to that yet. Been picking up extra shifts at work." What bothered me most wasn't the physical state of the house, but the realization that Robert hadn't contributed anything toward utilities or maintenance, despite our agreement. When I brought it up, he always had an excuse ready. "Jackson had a medical emergency," he explained during my July visit. "Had to get stitches after falling off his bike. The hospital bill wiped us out this month." I wanted to be sympathetic, especially when it came to the children's needs, but these emergencies seemed suspiciously frequent. "Robert, I understand things come up, but we had an agreement. I'm covering the property taxes and insurance, but you promised to handle utilities and minor repairs." "And I will," he insisted, looking wounded by my lack of trust. "Things are just tight right now. You don't know what it's like trying to support a family of 4 on my salary." I bit back the retort that he shouldn't have agreed to terms he couldn't meet. Instead, I said, "I'm trying to be flexible, but I need to see some effort on their part." His expression hardened slightly. "Right, because everything's always been so easy for you." During my August visit, I was troubled to find that all the family photos from the living room had been removed, replaced by generic artwork and photos of Robert's family. When I asked about the missing pictures, Tina answered casually, "Oh, we packed those away to make room for things. They're safe in boxes in the attic." I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic that afternoon and found the family photos carelessly piled in cardboard boxes, some frames cracked from rough handling. Among them was my favorite picture of Mom and Dad on their 30th anniversary, the glass now spiderwebbed with cracks. I carefully wrapped it in an old t-shirt and took it back to Seattle with me, fighting tears the entire drive home. That same month, I received a concerning call from Mrs. Wilson, our longtime neighbor. Madeline, dear, I hate to bother you, but there have been some disturbances at the house lately. Last weekend, there was a party that went well past midnight. Several cars parked on the lawn, and the music was so loud it set off car alarms. A party? I repeated, surprised. Robert hadn't mentioned entertaining. Yes, and it's not the first time. I wouldn't say anything, but your mother would be so upset to see the property traded this way. I thanked her for calling and immediately phoned Robert, who dismissed my concerns. Mrs. Wilson has always been a busybody, he said. It was just a few friends over for a barbecue. She exaggerates everything. My calls and texts to Robert became increasingly ignored or answered hours later with brief, non-committal responses. When I did reach him, he was defensive and quick to end conversations. Tina, once warm and appreciative, now seemed annoyed by my check-ins and questions. During my September visit, I was shocked to find a large new television mounted on the living room wall, holes drilled directly into the antique wainscoting Dad had carefully restored years ago. The kids' rooms had been completely redecorated, with paint colors I didn't recognize and posters attached to walls with tape that was already peeling paint in spots. He should have consulted me before making permanent changes to the house, I said, struggling to keep my voice lovely. Robert rolled his eyes. It's just a few nail holes, Maddie. We're living here, not maintaining a museum. Living here temporarily, I reminded him. And you're supposed to be saving for your own place. How are you affording new TVs and furniture if you can't even pay the utilities? We got a great deal, he said vaguely. And my credit card had a 0% interest promotion. The stress of the situation began affecting my work in Seattle. I found myself distracted during client meetings, checking my phone constantly for updates from neighbors or responses from Robert. Jessica noticed my preoccupation during an important property showing. Madeline, you seem off today, she said as we left the luxury condo we'd been presenting. The Andersons were asking questions that you should have anticipated. Is everything okay? I hesitated, then admitted, I'm having some issues with my brother and the family house in Portland. Jessica's expression softened slightly. Family business can be complicated. Maybe you need to resolve that situation so it stops interfering with your work here. We've been patient because of your parents' passing, but the Simpson listing is coming up next month and I need you 100% focused. Her words, though delivered kindly, carried a clear warning. My career, which I'd worked so hard to build, was in jeopardy if I couldn't get the situation with Robert under control. That evening, I called my best friend Stephanie, who had known my family since childhood. I don't know what to do, I confessed after explaining the situation. I want to help Robert and the kids, but he's taking advantage of my goodwill. Honestly, Maddie, it sounds like he always has, Stephanie replied bluntly. Your parents enabled his behavior for years, and now he expects the same from you. But I can't just throw them out. Where would they go? The same place they'd be if your parents hadn't left you the house. Robert is an adult with responsibilities. Maybe it's time he faced them. Her words stayed with me as I made plans for another visit, this time unannounced. I needed to see what was happening when Robert didn't have time to prepare for my arrival. The growing knot of anxiety in my stomach told me things were worse than I was allowing myself to believe. I decided to drive down on a Friday evening, knowing from social media posts that Robert and Tina usually stayed home on Fridays to save money. As I approached the familiar street, the sound of music reached me before I even turned the corner. Cars lined both sides of the road, and lights blazed from every window of my parents' home. My heart sank as I parked a block away and walked toward the house. This was clearly not just a few friends for a barbecue. This was exactly the kind of party Mrs. Wilson had described, and from the looks of it, it wasn't an isolated incident. The bass for the music vibrated through the floorboards as I quietly entered through the side door using my key. The kitchen was cluttered with empty beer bottles and pizza boxes, a far cry from the spotless space where Mom had taught me to bake cookies and Dad had shown me how to properly season a cast iron skillet. A group of people I didn't recognize stood around the kitchen island, mixing drinks and laughing loudly. No one noticed me as I slipped past, too absorbed in their conversations and smartphones. The living room was even more crowded, with at least 20 people squeezed onto furniture and standing in clusters. Cigarette smoke hung in the air despite Mom's lifelong no-smoking rule, and several drinking games were in progress on Dad's antique coffee table, now marred with rings and scratches. I spotted Tina across the room, wearing a cocktail dress I didn't recognize and, more shockingly, a pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. It was meant to be a keepsake, something Mom had specifically mentioned she wanted me to have. The sight of it around Tina's neck made my stomach clench with anger and betrayal. Before confronting anyone, I retreated to the relative quiet of the kitchen to collect myself. I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply and trying to decide the best approach. Robert and Tina were clearly taking advantage of the situation, but making a scene in front of all these strangers wouldn't solve anything. As I stood there, partially hidden by the refrigerator, I heard familiar voices approaching from the dining room. Robert and Tina entered with another couple, all holding drinks and speaking loudly to be heard over the music. "So, how long do you get to stay in this place?" the other man asked, gesturing around with his beer bottle. Robert snorted. "Supposedly 6 months, but we're working on extending that indefinitely." "What about your sister?" the woman asked. "Doesn't she want to sell it?" "Madeline." Tina rolled her eyes. "She's too busy with her fancy real estate career in Seattle to care about this place. She only visits once a month to check up on us like we're children." I pressed myself further into the shadow of the refrigerator, heart pounding as I listened. "Besides," Robert continued, lowering his voice slightly, "she's not real family anyway since she was adopted. My parents just felt sorry for her." The words hit me like a physical blow. Adopted? That couldn't be right. No one had ever mentioned adoption to me. Not once in 34 years. "Really?" the other woman said, leaning in with interest. "She doesn't know?" "Nope," Robert laughed. "My parents never told her. They were wondering when she turned 18 but then decided it would hurt her feelings or some bullshit. I found the papers when I was looking for my birth certificate years ago." "That explains why she looks nothing like you," the man observed. Tina nodded, touching the pearl necklace at her throat. "Exactly. And, honestly, she shouldn't even own this house. We're the ones with Robert's parents' actual grandchildren. Ashley and Jackson are their real legacy, not Madeline." "So what's her plan?" the woman asked. Robert smiled, a calculating expression I'd never seen before. "We just need to stay long enough to establish residency rights. My buddy Marcus is a lawyer, and he says if we can prove we've been maintaining the property and paying bills, we might have a case to challenge the will, especially since she's not blood-related." "Smart," the man approved. "And it's not like she needs the money with her job." "Exactly," Tina agreed. "She can buy another house anywhere. This one should stay in the actual family." I didn't wait to hear more. Moving silently, I slipped back through the side door and out to my car, tears blurring my vision. Once inside, I locked the doors and let the full impact of what I'd heard wash over me. Adopted. The word echoed in my mind, reshaping my entire understanding of my identity and family history. There had never been even a hint that I wasn't my parents' biological child. I had Mom's smile. Everyone said so. Dad's love of architecture and design had seemed like a natural inheritance of his interests. But looking back, there were small things that suddenly made sense. The absence of baby pictures before what appeared to be about 6 months of age. The way extended family sometimes looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Robert's occasional cryptic comments about being the real son when we argued as teenagers. I drove to a nearby hotel in a daze, checked him mechanically, and collapsed onto the bed. The room spun around me as pieces of my life rearranged themselves into this new reality. Through my tears, I called the one person I knew would understand the magnitude of this revelation. Stephanie. I choked out when she answered. Did you know I was adopted? There was a pause, then a gentle, "Oh, Maddie." No, I didn't know for sure, but I suspected. There were rumors when we were kids. I never said anything, because it didn't matter. Your parents adored you. Robert knows. I managed through tears. He's known for years, and never told me. And now he's saying he is more right to the house because he's their biological child, and his kids are their real grandchildren. That's absolute garbage, Stephanie said firmly. Being adopted doesn't make you any less their daughter. Your parents chose you, Maddie. And they chose to leave you the house. We talked for over an hour, Stephanie's steady voice helping me process the initial shock. By the time we hung up, my tears had subsided, replaced by a hollow ache and growing anger toward Robert. Not for the adoption revelation itself, but for the cruel way he had discussed it, wielding this information as a weapon to delegitimize me. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with questions. Why hadn't my parents told me? Were there records I could access about my birth parents? Did this change anything legally about my inheritance? And beneath these practical concerns pulsed the deeper, more painful question. Was I truly part of the family I had loved my entire life? As dawn broke, I watched the sun rise over the Portland skyline from my hotel window, feeling both lost and strangely liberated. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not allow Robert to use my adoption as a tool to take what her parents had explicitly wanted me to have. First thing Saturday morning, I called Mr. Phillips, my parents' attorney. Though initially reluctant to discuss the matter on a weekend, he agreed to meet me at his office when I explained the urgency. "Yes, you were adopted," he confirmed once we were seated in his wood-paneled office. "Your parents came to me for the legal work when you were about 5 months old. It was a private adoption arranged through a church organization after your birth mother, a young college student, decided she couldn't provide for you. And my parents never planned to tell me." I asked, still struggling to process this fundamental truth about myself. Mr. Phillips looked uncomfortable. "They discussed it with me several times over the years. They wanted to tell you when you were old enough to understand, but they were afraid of hurting you or making you feel different." As time passed, it became harder to find the right moment. Did Robert know officially? Not to my knowledge. Your parents wanted to tell you first, before anyone else in the family knew. If Robert found out, it wasn't from them intentionally. Does this affect the will, in any way? I asked, coming to the critical question. Can Robert challenge it on the grounds that I'm not their biological child? Mr. Phillips shook his head firmly. Absolutely not. Your adoption was legal and complete. In the eyes of the law, you are their daughter in every sense. The will is ironclad. Your parents were very clear about their wishes. Relieved but still troubled, I asked, what about his claim about establishing residency rights? That's a common misconception, Mr. Phillips explained. Allowing family members to live in a property you own doesn't automatically give them rights to it. As long as there was a clear agreement about the temporary nature of the arrangement, which I understand there was, you're within your rights to end it. Armed with this information, I went to my bank next. The safe deposit box contained important documents, including the deed to the house, my parents' will, and, I discovered with a catch in my throat, a sealed envelope with my name on it in Mom's handwriting. I tucked it into my purse, not ready to read it yet. Back at the hotel, I called Jessica to let her know I would be staying in Portland until Monday. I need to handle this situation once and for all, I explained. It's affecting my work, and that's not fair to you or the agency. Take the time you need, she said, sounding relieved. Just keep me updated. I spent the rest of Saturday formulating my plan and consulting with Mr. Phillips about the legal steps for formal eviction, if it came to that. By Sunday morning, I felt prepared, though my stomach was in knots as I drove back to the house. I arrived just after 10, when I knew the family would typically be finishing breakfast. The house looked markedly different in daylight than it had during Friday night's party. Empty bottles and cups still littered the front yard, and a damp, stained couch that I didn't recognize sat abandoned on the porch. Using my key, I entered to find Robert and Tina arguing in the kitchen. The children were in the living room, Jackson playing a video game at full volume while Ashley texted on her phone, both oblivious to the mess surrounding them. "I told you we need to pay the credit card minimum at least," Tina was saying, her voice sharp with frustration. "They're threatening to freeze the account. And I told you I'll handle it when I get paid on Friday," Robert shot back. "What do you want me to do? Pull money out of thin air?" They both froze when they noticed me standing in the doorway. Robert recovered first, his expression shifting to forced casualness. "Maddie, we weren't expecting you until next weekend. You should have called." "Clearly," I said, looking pointedly at the disaster around us. Dishes were piled in the sink, counter sticky with spilled drinks, and the floor crunched with snack debris underfoot. "We had a few friends over last night," Tina said, not meeting my eyes. I noticed she wasn't wearing Mom's pearls today. "We're just about to clean up." "Actually, I was here Friday night too," I said quietly. Robert's face paled slightly. "You were? Why didn't you say hello?" "I think you know why." I moved further into the kitchen, setting my purse on the counter. "I heard your conversation with your friends. About me being adopted. About your plans to challenge the will." Tina immediately looked to Robert, who attempted a dismissive laugh. "You misunderstood. We were just joking around after a few drinks." "Don't," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "Don't lie to me anymore, Robert. I talked to Mr. Phillips yesterday. He confirmed I was adopted, but he also confirmed that it has absolutely no bearing on the validity of the will. This house is legally mine." "Maddie, look," Robert began, switching tactics. "Even if we did talk about challenging the will, we were just frustrated. You have to admit it's not really fair that you got everything just because you were Dad's favorite." "This isn't about favorites," I replied. "It's about responsibility. Mom and Dad made their decision based on what they thought was best for the family property." Tina interjected, her tone defensive. "Well, it's not fair to the children. This is their grandparents' home. They have a right to grow up here." "No, they don't," I said firmly. "What they have is an aunt who is willing to hug their parents during a difficult time. An aunt who you've been talking about behind her back, whose property you've been damaging, and whose family mementos you've been treating as your own." I looked directly at Tina. "Like Mom's pearl necklace you were wearing Friday night." She flushed but remained defiant. "Robert said I could have it. It looks better on me anyway." I took a deep breath, fighting to maintain my composure. Family isn't just about blood, which is something I've apparently understood better than you despite not knowing I was adopted. Family is about respect, honesty, and honoring each other's boundaries. You've shown me none of those things. I reached into my purse and pulled out the deed to the house, placing it on the kitchen table between us. "This is the deed to this property. It's in my name. According to our original agreement, you have 3 more months here. But given what I've discovered, I'm amending that timeline. You have 30 days to find another place to live." Robert's face darkened with anger. "You can't do that. We have rights." "Actually, I can. I've already confirmed it with Mr. Phillips. This was a temporary arrangement that you violated on multiple levels. I'm being generous by giving you 30 days instead of demanding you leave immediately." "And where are we supposed to go?" Tina demanded, gesturing toward the living room where the children remained absorbed in their devices. "You'd put your own niece and nephew out on the street?" "Don't try to manipulate me," I said calmly. "You have the $20,000 from the will, assuming you haven't spent it all already. That's enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on an apartment. You had a place before you moved here, and you'll find another one now." Robert's expression shifted from anger to panic as he realized I was serious. "Maddie, come on. We're family. You can't just throw us out." "That's interesting coming from someone who said I'm not real family 2 days ago." I picked up the deed and returned it to my purse. "I'll be back next weekend with the formal eviction papers. I suggest you start packing and looking for a new place immediately." "This is about the adoption thing, isn't it?" Robert said, his voice rising. "You're punishing us because you're hurt that Mom and Dad didn't tell you." "That's not our fault." "No, it's not about that," I replied, maintaining my calm. "It's about the fact that you tried to use that information to delegitimize me and take something that doesn't belong to you. It's about the disrespect you've shown to this house and to our parents' memory." Tina started to cry, though the performance felt calculated. "Think about the children, Madeline. They love it here. They finally have stability. They had stability before, and they'll have it again," I said, unmoved by the display. "That responsibility falls on their parents, not on me." I turned to leave, but Robert grabbed my arm. "You can't do this. I won't let you." I looked down at his hand until he released me. "This isn't up for debate. 30 days, Robert. And if the house isn't in the same condition it was when you moved in, I'll deduct the repair costs from any remaining inheritance money." As I walked out, I heard Tina dissolve into genuine tears and Robert kick a kitchen chair in frustration. The children looked up briefly as I passed through the living room, Jackson offering a small wave that I returned with a sad smile. Once in my car, I allowed myself to shake, the adrenaline of the confrontation washing through me. I had done it. I had stood up to Robert and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. But the victory felt hollow against the weight of everything I had lost. The brother I thought I had, the parents I would never be able to ask about my adoption, and the simple understanding of my place in the world that had been shattered in a single weekend. As I drove back to Seattle that afternoon, I finally felt ready to open the envelope from my safe deposit box. At a rest stop along I-5, I carefully broke the seal and unfolded a letter written in Mom's neat handwriting. "My dearest Madeline," it began. "If you're reading this, it means we never found the right moment to tell you what we should have shared long ago. You came into our lives when you were just a tiny baby, not through my body but through our hearts." Tears blurred my vision as I read their explanation, their fears about telling me, and most importantly, their absolute certainty that I was meant to be their daughter. "Never doubt for a moment that you were ours," Mom had written, "and that we are yours, in every way that truly matters." I drove the rest of the way to Seattle with the letter on the passenger seat beside me, a tangible reminder that family is defined by love, not biology, a truth that Robert, for all his biological connection, had never understood. The emotional breakdown I'd been holding at bay finally came once I reached the safety of my Seattle condo. I sat in my parked car in the underground garage for nearly an hour, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. It wasn't just about Robert's betrayal or the adoption revelation, but the culmination of everything. Losing both parents within a year, the stress of managing the house from a distance, and now this final fracturing of what family I had left. When I finally made it upstairs, I called Stephanie. "I did it," I told her, my voice hoarse. "I told them they have 30 days to leave." "I'm proud of you," she said. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't, but it's done." I paused, then added, "I read Mom's letter about my adoption. And they loved me, Steph. They really did. They were afraid telling me would make me feel less like their daughter." "Which is exactly what Robert tried to use against you," Stephanie observed. "Your parents knew him better than you think." The next morning I called Dr. Bennett, a therapist I'd briefly seen after Dad died. She agreed to fit me in that afternoon, and I spent nearly 2 hours in her office, unraveling the complex emotions surrounding my adoption discovery. "It's normal to feel a sense of identity disruption," she assured me. "Finding out you're adopted as an adult can be particularly challenging, because you've already formed your sense of self around certain assumptions. I keep wondering who my birth parents were. I admit it. If I have biological siblings out there somewhere. That's a natural curiosity, Dr. Bennett said. Would you want to try to find them? I considered this. I think I would, eventually. Not to replace my parents. They'll always be mom and dad to me, but to understand my complete story. We discussed how I might begin that search when I was ready, as well as healthier ways to process my anger toward Robert. I left feeling slightly more grounded, with a plan to continue weekly sessions. Back at work, I forced myself to focus on my clients and listings, grateful for the distraction. Jessica noted the change in my demeanor during our team meeting. You seem more present today, she commented afterward. I take it you resolved the situation with your brother? In progress, I replied. But I've set clear boundaries now. Good. The Simpson listing presentation is next week, and I'd like you to take the lead. I threw myself into preparing for the presentation, working late into evenings to create the perfect pitch for the multi-million-dollar property. The work kept my mind occupied during the day, but nights were harder. I would find myself staring at old family photos, searching for clues I might have missed, signs that I wasn't biologically related to the people who raised me. One evening, going through a box of memorabilia I'd brought from Portland, I found a stack of letters bundled with a faded ribbon. They were from Mom to Dad during a brief period when they lived apart while he worked on a construction project in another state. In one, dated about a year before I was born, she wrote about their struggles with infertility and her longing for a child. The doctor says there's little hope, she had written. But I dream about our baby every night. Somehow, someway, I know we'll be parents. The right child will find us. I held the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. They had wanted me so desperately, had chosen me, had built their lives around making mine better. How could Robert not see the beauty in that? Speaking of Robert, his reaction to my ultimatum was predictably chaotic. The day after our confrontation, he began a campaign of harassment via text messages, alternating between angry accusations and pitiful pleas. You're destroying this family out of spite, one message read. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you. Hours later, please reconsider, Maddie. The kids are devastated. Where are we supposed to go on such short notice? I didn't respond to any of these messages, following Dr. Bennett's advice to maintain firm boundaries. Robert escalated by posting vague references to the situation on social media, portraying himself as a victim of family betrayal. Several distant relatives and mutual acquaintances reached out to me, concerned about his claims that I was evicting children from their grandparents' home. That's not the full story, was all I would say when asked. It's a private family matter. Tina's parents called me directly, their number showing up on my phone one evening a week after the confrontation. Madeline, this is Richard Monroe, Tina's father, a gruff voice said when I answered. I understand you're putting my grandchildren out on the street. Mr. Monroe, with all due respect, I'm not discussing this with extended family, I replied firmly. Robert and Tina have known for months that the arrangement was temporary. Well, they don't have anywhere to go, he insisted. Can't you give them more time? 6 months at least. They've had 3 months already to save and plan, I pointed out. And they have the inheritance money from my parents. I'm sorry, but my decision is final. After several more such calls, I began blocking numbers and restricting my social media accounts. I felt terrible about the children being caught in the middle, but reminded myself that their welfare was their parents' responsibility, not mine. The property manager I'd hired to oversee the formal eviction process called with concerning news midway through the 30-day period. And thus, Ellis, I visited the property yesterday to deliver the written notice, as required by law. I need to inform you that there appears to be some intentional damage occurring. What kind of damage? I asked, my stomach sinking. Nothing structural, but it looks like someone has been deliberately careless. There are new stains on carpets, scratches on hardwood floors, and some small holes in walls that weren't there when I did the initial inspection 3 weeks ago. I closed my eyes, trying to contain my anger. Document everything with photos, please. We'll address it when they vacate. There's something else, he added hesitantly. Mr. Ellis is telling neighbors that he plans to contest the eviction in court. He's claiming established residency rights and improper notice. Although Mr. Phillips had assured me these claims had no legal merit, the threat of a court battle added another layer of stress. I began to second-guess my decision. Was I being too harsh? Should I have given them more time? Was I letting my hurt feelings about the adoption revelation cloud my judgment? I called Stephanie in a moment of weakness. Maybe I should just sell them the house at a reduced price, I suggested. Then I wouldn't have to deal with any of this anymore. Absolutely not, she said firmly. That's exactly what they want. They've been manipulating you from the beginning, Maddie. Stand your ground. A surprising source of support came from Elaine Wilson, my mother's best friend, who called after hearing about the situation from neighbors. Your mother would be horrified by Robert's behavior, she told me. She always worried about his sense of entitlement. Did she ever mention to you that I was adopted? I asked hesitantly. Yes, dear, she did, Elaine admitted. It was one of her deepest regrets that they never told you. They planned to so many times, but your father was especially afraid it would hurt you. Did Robert know? Not from your parents, she said. But there was an incident when he was about 14. He was looking for his birth certificate in your father's office and found her adoption papers. Your mother caught him and made him promise not to say anything until they had a chance to tell you themselves. So he's known since he was 14 and never said anything, I mused, a new dimension of betrayal washing over me. I suspect he liked having that secret power, Elaine said sadly. Robert always was a bit jealous of the attention your parents gave you. As the eviction date approached, my anxiety increased. I took time off work to be in Portland for the final day, something Jessica was surprisingly supportive of once I explained the full situation. Family business needs to be handled decisively, she said. Get it done so you can move forward. Robert made a last-ditch attempt to delay the process by filing an emergency motion with the court, claiming insufficient notice and hardship. Mr. Phillips represented me at the hearing, and the judge quickly ruled in my favor, noting the clear temporary nature of the original agreement and the proper legal notice provided. The sheriff was scheduled to enforce the eviction if necessary, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Either way, in less than a week, the house would be mine again, and this painful chapter could begin to close. On the morning of the eviction, I parked down the street from the house, my heart pounding as I watched moving trucks in the driveway. Robert had finally accepted the inevitable, it seemed. The property manager, David, met me at my car. They're nearly finished loading, he reported. The sheriff is here as a precaution, but so far it's proceeding without incident. I nodded, relieved but still apprehensive. I'll wait until they're gone before I go in. For the next 2 hours, I sat in my car watching my brother's family remove the last traces of themselves from our parents' home. Ashley and Jackson looked subdued, carrying small boxes to a separate car parked on the street. Tina moved efficiently, directing the movers, while Robert stood in the driveway looking lost and occasionally glaring in the direction of my car. When the trucks were loaded and the family gathered for a final check, I steeled myself and approached. The sheriff stepped closer, alert to potential conflict. So that's it, Robert said as I walked up. You win. Happy now? This was never about winning, Robert, I replied quietly. It was about respecting our parents' wishes and the agreement we made. Tina wouldn't look at me, keeping an arm around each child. Ashley, always perceptive, broke away and came to give me an awkward hug. I'm sorry about the hole in my bedroom wall, she whispered. Jackson threw a controller during a game, and Dad said not to tell you. I hugged her back, my heart breaking for these innocent participants in adult conflicts. It's okay. Take care of yourself, Ash. Jackson waved from beside his mother, but didn't approach. Robert finally spoke again, his voice tight. "Where are we supposed to go now? Are you satisfied knowing your brother's family has to start over from nothing?" "You're not starting from nothing, Robert," I said evenly. "You had the inheritance, 3 months of rent-free living, and ample warning. I'm sorry it's come to this, but your choices led us here." He laughed bitterly. "Right, blame me. Perfect Madeline never does anything wrong." "I'm far from perfect," I admitted. "But I am done being manipulated by you. I hope you find a good place for your family." With nothing left to say, they drove away, the sheriff following to ensure they actually left the property. David gave me the new keys. I'd had the locks changed as a precaution, and left me alone to face whatever waited inside. The damage was worse than I'd anticipated. Beyond the normal wear and tear of family living, there were signs of deliberate neglect and petty vandalism. Cigarette burns on the kitchen counters. A long scratch down the hallway wall that appeared to have been made by a key. Water damage in the bathroom where a leak had clearly been left unaddressed for weeks. I moved through the rooms methodically, photographing everything for insurance purposes and making notes on repairs needed. In Ashley's room, I found the hole she'd mentioned, poorly concealed behind a poster. In Jackson's room, the carpet had a large bleach stain that hadn't been there during my last visit. The master bedroom, my parents' room, had been left in the worst condition. Drawers hung open, empty save for discarded papers and old receipts. The closet doors were off their tracks, and something dark had been spilled on the carpet beside the bed. I sat on the edge of the stripped mattress, overwhelmed by the task ahead and the malice evident in the state of the house. But as I looked around, I noticed something tucked beneath the radiator, a familiar wooden box that had always sat on my father's dresser. I retrieved it, surprised by its weight, and opened it to find a collection of family photos and mementos Robert had apparently hidden rather than packed in the move. Among them was a photo I hadn't seen before, my parents holding me as a baby, standing outside what appeared to be a courthouse. My adoption day, I realized, tears welling in my eyes. They looked radiant with joy, Mom gazing down at me with such love it took my breath away. I pressed the photo to my heart, grateful to have found this tangible evidence of their choice to make me their daughter. Over the next 2 weeks, I divided my time between Seattle and Portland, overseeing repairs to the house and sorting through what remained of my parents' belongings. Each room held memories, some painful now in light of recent events, but many still warm and comforting. As I cleaned and organized, I came to a decision about the property. Despite my original plan to sell it, I realized I wasn't ready to part with this final connection to my parents. Instead, I would rent it out temporarily while I considered longer-term options. More surprisingly, I found myself thinking about Robert's children. Whatever their parents' faults, Ashley and Jackson were innocent, and they were still my niece and nephew. After much reflection and consultation with Mr. Phillips, I decided to use a portion of my inheritance to establish college funds for both children. "I'd like to set this up anonymously," I explained to Mr. Phillips. "I don't want Robert to know the money is for me." "That's very generous, Madeline," he said. "Are you sure?" "After everything that's happened, I'm sure. The kids shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes." With the house repairs underway and rental plans in motion, I returned to Seattle ready to focus on my career and personal growth. Jessica was pleased with my renewed engagement at work, and the Simpson listing I'd been worried about turned into one of our most successful sales of the quarter. "Whatever you did in Portland," she commented after the closing, "it seems to have given you a new edge. You're more assertive with clients, in a good way." She was right. Standing up to Robert had changed something fundamental in how I approached conflict. The fear of confrontation that had led me to accept his excuses for so long had diminished, replaced by a clearer sense of my own boundaries. This new confidence extended to my personal journey as well. With Dr. Bennett's guidance, I began researching my adoption and biological origins. The process was slow and often frustrating, complicated by the private nature of the adoption and the years that had passed, but each small discovery helped me build a more complete picture of myself. 6 months after the eviction, I received an unexpected text from Robert. "Can we talk?" was all it said. I considered ignoring it, but after discussing it with Dr. Bennett, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop halfway between Portland and Seattle. He looked thinner when he arrived, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of difficult months. "How are you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Managing," he replied. "We found an apartment in Beaverton. It's small, but it works for now. The kids are adjusting." "And Tina?" He looked down at his coffee. "She left last month. Said she couldn't handle the downsizing. She's staying with her parents while we figure things out." Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Yeah, well." He shrugged. "Turns out she was mostly interested in the lifestyle she thought I could provide. Once that was gone." He trailed off, then looked at me directly for the first time. "I owed you an apology, Maddie. What I said about you not being real family was cruel and wrong." I was desperate and lashing out. I studied his face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to. But his expression seemed genuinely remorseful. "Why did you never tell me about the adoption?" I asked. "All those years, you knew and kept it from me." "At first because Mom made me promise," he admitted. "Later, I guess it became a kind of power. Something I knew that you didn't. It was petty and childish." "Yes, it was," I agreed. "And using it against me when you thought it might help you take the house was worse than childish." He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I know. I can't undo that. But I am trying to do better, for the kids, if nothing else." We talked for nearly 2 hours, covering painful ground but also remembering good times with our parents. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful hugging or promises to start fresh. Instead, we reached a tentative truce, agreeing to limited contact centered mostly around the children. "Ashley asks about you," he said as we prepared to leave. "She wants to know if she can call you sometimes." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "They're still my niece and nephew." "Thank you," he replied, "for not cutting them off because of me." Back in Seattle, I continued the process of rebuilding my life. I renovated my condo, creating a space that truly felt like mine for the first time. I joined a support group for adult adoptees, finding comfort in shared experiences and challenges. And slowly, I began dating again, no longer putting my personal life on hold for family crises. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Elliott Bay, I opened Mom's letter again. I'd read it countless times in the months since discovering it, but now different lines stood out to me. "Family is not about blood or birth certificates," she had written. "It's about who stands beside you in difficult times, who celebrates your joys and comforts your sorrows. It's about love, not genetics." I thought about how I discovered the truth of these words through their absence in Robert's behavior and their presence in the support of friends like Stephanie. I thought about the strength I'd found in standing up for myself and the peace that came from setting clear boundaries. Most of all, I thought about the family I might create one day through birth, adoption, or simply the close bonds of chosen relationships. And the values I would pass on from the parents who had chosen me and loved me completely. The journey of discovery wasn't over. There would be more questions, more searching, more processing of complex emotions. But sitting there with the Seattle skyline blooming golden in the fading light, I felt a sense of belonging to myself that no revelation or betrayal could shake. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who betrayed your trust? How did you find the strength to set boundaries while still honoring the importance of family connections? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and finding personal strength through difficult times. Thank you for listening to my journey, And remember that true family is defined by love and respect, not blood or legal